On a regular day, we can scan 8 to 9 people, maybe 10 on a regular scanner. And when we do anesthesia, then actually we're blocking the scanner for several slots because we are actually putting the children into anesthesia right in front of the scanner in the preparation room, and thereby the scanner is basically for 2 or 3 slots staying there empty. And this means you can only get 3 or 4 people through on the same day. And the problem is that anesthesiologists are a rare resource in a hospital. They're used everywhere. There's unfortunately not enough of them. And they're also very expensive to educate and so on, to keep on the payroll. And in the literature, especially in research, it has been standard that you cannot put children into anesthesia, right? You won't get ethical approval for a study, especially not on healthy children, if you want to try to sedate them for imaging. So when we saw this problem, we said, okay, how can we help? How can we do something that is actually preventing all this overhead and all this waste of resources, but also making a better patient experience? Because as we all know, being in anesthesia is not a trivial thing, and especially not if you're a child and you don't even understand what's going on. And we had a 5-year-old boy, and we went through the mock scanner session, and after he was finished, I asked him, so are you worried for Friday for your scan? And he's like, no, of course not. It's just going to be the same thing.
Hi, my name is Christopher Anderson, marketing manager at NordicNeuroLab, and I'm here with Melanie Ganz. I'm really excited to having this conversation. We had a conversation before this, and it was super exciting. I really felt that I met a person who's we're on the same page, definitely on the same page, and she's been doing great work. I came across Melanie when I was in Denmark. She was mentioned by someone else from Siemens and her work, and he connected us, and we had a chat, and we figured out we need to do an interview because there's a lot of information here that could be inspirational. And basically, what you've done, you build a mock scanner at your hospital in Denmark, and I would like you to go into what you've done and why you did it.
Of course. Well, thanks for having me for the interview and being allowed to tell a little bit about our project. So let me wrap it up from the back, kind of. Our project, the reason why it was started was basically that we could see here at our national hospital in Denmark, at Rigshospitalet, we have a quite long waiting list for scans, especially for MRI scans. And the reason for this is that for the MRI scans, in order for the children to get them in the scanner, but then also to have them lie still, we use a lot of sedation or full anesthesia, depending on the age and so on. And the problem is that anesthesiologists are a rare resource in a hospital. They're used everywhere. There's unfortunately not enough of them. And they're also very expensive to educate and so on, to keep on the payroll. So we had quite a long waiting list, even though we have a large number of scanners. And as an example, for practical purposes, on a regular day, we can scan 8 to 9 people, maybe 10 on a regular scanner. And when we do anesthesia, then actually we're blocking the scanner for several slots because we are actually putting the children into anesthesia right in front of the scanner in the preparation room. And thereby the scanner is basically for 2 or 3 slots staying there empty. And this means you can only get 3 or 4 people through on the same day. So when we saw this problem, we said, okay, how can we help? How can we do something that is actually preventing all this overhead and all this waste of resources, but also making a better patient experience? Because as we all know, being in anesthesia is not a trivial thing, and especially not if you're a child and you don't even understand what's going on. So this was kind of our problem setting, and then we thought how to alleviate it. And one of the things that we started looking at is, of course, the literature. And in the literature, especially in research, it has been standard that you cannot put children into anesthesia, right? You won't get ethical approval for a study, especially not on healthy children, if you want to try to sedate them for imaging. So we looked in the literature what was there, and there were a lot of approaches. On the one hand, for preparation, there have been approaches out with storybooks or with kind of games before the children come to the MR scanner. Then there was also some studies that had used mock scanners before. And then finally, we were in the unique position that we work together with a small Danish startup that had made an MR-compatible tracking device that we then also could kind of add image analysis on top of preparation in order to get the best images out. And this is the angle where I actually started from, because my background is in computer science and medical imaging. So when we looked at the literature, we basically could see that preparation is a key part to even get the children in the scanner, but also to have them lie still. And that's where the mock scanner came into play, that the mock scanner seems to be a crucial part in the sense that the children in a mock scanner, if it looks like a real scanner, like it does in our case, and maybe we can share pictures later on of our mock scanner, when they've seen the environment before and they have tried it without any pressure, without any I would say hesitation, because there is no magnetic field or anything that even the parents need to be afraid of, and they can just play, they can crawl around on the scanner, they can, you know, choose a video and go in and watch the video, and that just makes them feel safe. And that safety is then also transported to the real scan experience. So for example, I can give an example from our study where we're currently recruiting children in a prospective study and seeing how many of the children that are originally referred to an MRI with general anesthesia, how many of them can we convert to basically have a scan without anesthesia. And we had a 5-year-old boy, and we went through the mock scanner session, and after he was finished, I asked him, so are you worried for Friday for your scan? And he's like, no, of course not. It's just going to be the same thing.
Yeah. And that's so good, because there are so many ways that you can approach it, but the goal is really to reduce the number of anesthesia for several reasons. One is the risk for the child in case of using it. Another one is for the hospital is the cost and the waiting list. And by just doing some, you can even do simple measures, but also more complicated measures like building a mock scanner in order to just improve it. And by improving it, it's a big game changer. What are some of the results of the measures you've done so far?
Yeah, so we have the prospective study ongoing, and the aim is to recruit 50 children that are referred to as scan with GA. Right now we have done 8, and 7 out of 8 we could convert. And the one that we couldn't convert is actually coming back. He's not going to be included in our study, but the parents were so happy about the project that they say, we want to try again because we believe this time he could. So we basically are allowing them to, at the site, go through the training procedure again, so he in the future has a chance to be scanned without GA. Because we have now, for example, had some children with genetic diseases. They get scanned every half a year. And until now, they have been scanned with full anesthesia.
Yeah, and it's I'm not sure why, but I think that this pressure of the time and the waiting list has just caused them to take, okay, this is the measure that we know will work, so let's implement that, and then this has become the standard. But what you're talking about now is like choosing a different path that might be more effort in the beginning, but in the long run, it's actually saving a lot of time and saving a lot of costs and also risks for the patient. In terms of anesthesia, you talked about they're hard to find, the doctors, and they're expensive to use, also with time. But have you looked into some of the risks for the children by using anesthesia?
Yeah, so if you look at the literature also, you can see that there have been some animal studies where they have shown that repetitive anesthesia has neurotoxic effects. But even in real child population, there have been basically retrospective studies where they looked at children that had been exposed to especially several times of anesthesia, and they saw a rise of some of the, I would say, not psychiatric, but diseases like ADHD and so on. So we know that it can have bad influences, especially if it happens several times. And when you, for example, take the case of an oncology patient, often they come in, they maybe have a headache or other symptoms, and they get a first diagnostic scan, and then they see what is happening. Then they might request another scan right before operation, and then afterwards they have usually a 3 or 6 months follow-up and also a 1 year follow-up. So that's several scans, and if for all of the scans plus the operation they have full anesthesia, that's just a lot. Then we can easily come up to 3 to 5 times anesthesia. And if we at least can take the anesthesia for the scanning procedures away, that would already help in terms of exposure. And yeah, I mean, at least in our hospital, just to make this very clear, I mean, the anesthesiologists are really, those are the resource to have in the hospital. So we don't even want to take jobs away from them with our project, but they're such a scarce resource because they're needed in all operations. They're needed for all births where you request an epidural, you have to get the anesthesiologist in. So it's just such a resource that's scarce in many hospitals, that it's hard to take them away for 3 hours. For our child scans, for 3 hours, the neuro anesthesiologist plus a nurse are present for 3 hours, and that takes them, of course, out of the rest of the workflow.
Yeah, and definitely, and I think there's a valid point that we're not trying to fire the people who work with anesthesia, but we're actually trying to, since they're a limited resource, it's more that there are other measures that can be used prior to actually using anesthesia.
Exactly, and we also know that from our experience now, especially in our age range that we're looking now between, let's say, 10 and 5, we can do a lot. But we know going further down, especially the 3 and 4-year-olds, 2-year-olds, it's much harder. And especially if we have children that are not normally developed, there will always be cases where we cannot do the kind of approach that we're using right now, just because the mental capacity is not there. And for those children, we will always need the anesthesia or sedation. So we will never completely get 100% away from it. But if you look at the studies they, for example, done in Denmark, where in Kolding, they introduced they introduced an app and then a play area before the scanner. When they compared their numbers of anesthesia from the year where they introduced it to the year before, they had a reduction in anesthesia of 85%.
Oh. And that was just
huge numbers. This was with an app, and then they had a special play area in front of the scanner, and they have a special ambient system in the scanner as well.
Yeah, yeah, and that's such a key important point, because when it comes to driving the behavior, it's actually exposing them for an environment and actually making the environment more attractive for the children, which allows them to reduce their stress and anxiety. And exactly. If we also look at research and what works in terms of anxiety and fear, it's exposing them. Exposure therapy is the most valid type of therapy, and that's what you're doing with the mock scanner. You're actually exposing them to the environment, so it looks just like a proper scanner, but you don't have the magnet in it, you don't have the stress in it, so you sort of lower the threshold, which allows them to test it out.
Yeah, exactly. And even in our case, so what I haven't mentioned yet, even before they come to the hospital, what we have done is we have developed an app where they basically get small video bits and pictures of the environment they're going to meet. So even from home, they're already a little bit exposed to what am I going to meet. They see the hospital, they see the waiting area, they've seen the scanner before, and they have, kind of an idea what's going to happen in terms of the timeline when they come. And then they come to the mock scanner and have the real physical exposure. And then finally they come to the real scan. So it's really progressive, increasing the exposure to the final thing.
Yeah, and that makes the more they get this sense of mastery, the easier it becomes, and it could actually become a fun experience rather than a dreadful experience.
Exactly.
What other types of measures have you done besides like creating the app and the mock scanner?
So what we have had also quite a focus on is in the personnel group, and because we had seen this in the project in Kolding, that Kolding had developed this children-centered care approach for the scan sessions, and there they had made a specific pediatric team, and we have tried to copy some of their experience and had also been in contact with them and visited their site. And there, for example, in the mock scanner training procedure, we have previously had radiography students in that really are used to scanning. They have done a project on how should we best train on healthy children. And then furthermore, now we have actually some psychology students that have specifically worked with children before, and they are doing the training with the kids, and then they come with us to the scanner. So we have this extra support personnel besides the radiographers who are actually doing the scans. So we have a little bit of personnel overhead in terms of that we have right now students, or in the long run in the clinic when this gets implemented could be a pediatric nurse. But just having this one contact person that the children have seen already at the mock scanner, that then also meets them at the real scanner, gives them a sense of security and really helps. And I guess we have especially focused on experience with children because you need to know your audience. Someone comes, wants to talk Pokemon, you talk Pokemon. Someone wants to come and talk Paw Patrol, you talk Paw Patrol.
Yeah, correct. And that's just the basic of communication, is that you actually tailored your communication to the audience, as you say. And it's I've spoken to a couple of radiographers in the past, either at events or at the hospitals. And one thing that I really see that they feel they lack is learning how to deal with different types of patients in their education. So the patient communication part is still lacking in their education, but hopefully we can make a change in that and see that this is actually important. It's not just taking pictures, it's also coaching a patient through the process. And I think that by having tools like you created, in addition to knowing how to communicate, you just totally change the whole environment for both the patient and the radiographer. And that is I think the change is already happening, but I would like to see it progress faster because it's it will make a big impact in the long run.
Yeah, and actually, one of our project participants is one of the professors at our radiography school. So we have professional educations here in Denmark where the radiographers are educated. And one of the core people that has been a part of our, or collaborator on our project, Katrine Skak Madsen, she was one of the professors from the radiography school. And there exactly, we wanted to expose also them in their education to it. And then after, basically, we have a workflow, put the knowledge back. And actually the radiographers are great. The ones down at our scan environment, they're very interested in our approach. They're very supportive of it and want to do more of it. So in that sense, you're also giving more responsibility back to the people that are actually doing the scans. And they really like it because they have their professional pride, and they have also, in a lot of cases, they're interested in making it better for the patients.
Yeah, definitely, and that's my experience as well. It's so, I would say it's meaningful work when you see a patient that's afraid or anxious, but you're actually able to guide them through and they come out with a smiling face. I think that means a lot to the radiographers, and I hope that they can learn to develop those skills more, not just during their work experience, but also through school. And if you can get certain experts that is on the university campus that's available to come with their perspective and show how they can improve it, that's super valuable. I wanted to go into the mock scanner because that's a big process. That's a huge thing. You need a a separate room for it. You need to make it look like a real mock scanner. So could we go into the process of how you actually manage to build one?
Yeah, of course. So actually, when we originally thought about our project, we of course also looked around what we could find, and we had gotten an okay from the major vendors, Siemens and GE, that they could provide a mock scanner type of thing. And what I wanted especially was something that looks like a real scanner. Now, in our case, our real scanner that we're working with, it's half research, half clinically used, is a Siemens 3T Prisma scanner. And basically what we then ended up choosing is to choose a mock scanner that exactly looks like the real scanner in order to make the transition very smooth. And what we ended up doing is basically buying one of the exhibition scanners that Siemens had and had been flying around the world from one conference to the other. And that exhibition scanner was then actually dismantled, because not only you have the carbon covers of the scanner, but inside there's actually an iron core that was even cut in order to get it in the basement, because like you referred, you need a separate room. But luckily, as we were developing this project, the hospital was moving to a different location, and we were lucky enough to secure a big room. It's in the basement, but it is quite a big room, and we actually were able to be involved right in the building phase. So we actually have a room that is about the same size as our scanner room and has a small operator room right next to it. So it really mimics the real scan environment. And then we had the exhibition model, and then we had to add some bells and whistles. For example, I had then students come in, physics students, that helped me measure the decibel exposure of our sound system that we implanted. So we were sure to have the equivalent sound to the real scanner sound levels in the middle of the bore. We needed to be a little bit creative also in terms of intercom and so on, or how to process sound, because normally all of that is taken care of the real scanner. And if the real scanner is kind of empty, there's a lot of things you need to figure out how to do. But all of this could be solved. And now I could send you 2 pictures of our mock scanner room and our real scanner room. And besides some LED panels on the wall in the real scanner room, you wouldn't be able to tell a difference.
That's really cool. We also build a mock scanner at our head office in Bergen. We didn't have a ton of metal that we had to move in like you did, but we created we just had the Dexel, the outside of the scanner, and then we just created a wooden crate. It's great, but what happens is that it looks real, and the bore is often the trigger that creates this the stress response, and that's enough. They don't care about the magnet that's inside. They might care about the noise and the sounds. That's definitely one of the triggers. But if you can have those triggers and expose the patients to those triggers, and then they learn how to deal with them, then it becomes a walk in the park to do a real MRI experience.
Yeah, and here I have to say one of our tricks that we're using with the kids is that they are allowed to watch video. They're allowed to choose the video first. And as soon as you get them up on the bed and I show them, look, there's the TV. You want to watch TV?
Yeah.
And I get them in the head coil with the mirror on. I just ask them, is it okay if we go closer to the TV in order to get them in the bore? And most of them are like, yeah, I want closer to the TV. So for them, it's even like they don't even realize that they're going into a hole. Children are often very fine, actually, unless they are, of course, claustrophobic, but they're fine with being encased. They're not that worried about a hole. As soon as they feel safe with it, they're fine.
Yeah, that's true, and it's you can often compare it to like a playground where you go through. There are different holes like that, and it's just the same. And we I know that some of the staff at the Bergen office, they've had their children over, and they've been crawling through the mock scanner and having a lot of fun with it. And I wanted to ask you as well, how you've been doing this on children, but have you also been working with adults when it comes to claustrophobia and so on the mock scanner?
Yeah, so we are actually currently developing and starting up a project, and this is then leading by my neuropsychology colleagues here at the hospital in our research unit, NRU. And they are preparing an exposure therapy for claustrophobic adults. There was previously kind of an open plane scanner here in the region, but unfortunately that has been pensioned. So right now there is not a lot of choice for the claustrophobic patients. That's why they came up with the project. They're still under ethical approval because they had thought, okay, it should probably be fine if we want to do a simple exposure therapy of healthy people with claustrophobia only in the mock scanner, that they could set up a simple experiment quite quickly. But when they then asked the ethics committee, they said, no, we'd like to have a full protocol anyway. So right now they're waiting on hearing back from the ethical approval before they can go ahead and get patients in.
Good. But that will be in a study in the future. So that's probably something that we need to follow up on to see how that's
Definitely.
But based on the research that's done on exposure therapy, I can imagine that the success rate will be pretty high for that study. I hope so, at least.
Yeah, I have to refer to my colleagues that have been looking at it, how good it can be. But yeah, for the children, we know it's super high, and I can imagine once you do it right for the adults, it should also be possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. For the people who's listening into this interview and they're just, okay, this is never going to happen in my hospital. The board or the department are never going to allow us to get a room in the basement to build a mock scanner. We're never going to get the funds. We're never going to, and so on. So there are a couple of beliefs that might have before even trying. What would be your advice in order to start or get going with such projects or such measures?
So first of all, I think you should go dig in the literature. So Slipsager et al. They did a project here at Rigshospital published on, this was based on PET-MR and MR data. And if you talk to the board, hit them with the money argument. They have shown how much loss of funds there is with MR scanners due to patient movement or consequently anesthesia. So I think hit the literature and show them that there's real money to gain by helping the patients to have a better experience, because consequently they move less, and therefore you actually can save money because you don't have to rescan them. Or in the case of the children, you can save other resources. That'd be my first argument. And then in terms of getting started, there is again, I can refer to the Colling paper that is published in European Radiology, where they have looked at this children-centered care approach. So I would look at that and see if already with some play approach before the scanner, just adding something to your scanner environment, you can make it easier for the children. And then, for example, in our case, since my background is in computer science, we have made our app open source. So our app is something that you would call in app terms white label. It means you can easily interchange things in the app, and I bought the whole source course with it. And we have a GitHub repo where this is all available. You can find me on GitHub and then see it there. And basically this means as long as you can provide some footage of your MR scanner and of your waiting area, you can interchange the video sequences and pictures we used and then use it in your hospital. Right now we only have it available in Danish and English voice-wise, but otherwise you could then maybe add another language if necessary, if you want different types of video sequences.
So it's also possible to add voiceover to it. You can add that.
Exactly. It's basically an exchange. So that means when you find a local app company, or if you have the resources to get to the universities and the computer science department, it's relatively straightforward to change the app. It's not the same thing as going out and paying in terms of Danish crowns, 300 to 500,000 kroner for a completely new app, and then it's finished and you don't have any rights to it. Maybe you get service for 2 years included, but then afterwards you have to see how you update it and so on, and it's closed. So in that sense, we were working against this by having the software open. And by now, actually, our software has been taken over by the hospital IT department, and they are trying to develop it further and actually add some of our other departments on so that you have different choices in the app. And they could only do that because we as a research project had bought the source code and can provide it free.
I also have a question in terms of if a radiographer was watching this. You say first go to the management and hit them with the money problem, but also would you go to the anesthesia department and ask them how the current situation is, or how would you approach that?
I think you should definitely work inclusive. So I think when you're doing this in a radiography department, not only should you have your radiology and radiography leadership on board, but you should also include the anesthesiologist. That's what we also have done. We have talked to them before and said here, and I think the more open you are about what can be done, the more they will also say, okay, if you can help us restructuring our workload, bringing waiting times down, they're all for it. So we have, from all our involved parties, we have gotten huge support. And we're very thankful to have both the support of the anesthesiologist and the radiologist and the radiographers.
And that's another key question as well, because sometimes people feel and think that it's almost impossible to make any changes, or at least big changes. But your experience has actually been the opposite.
I would say, I mean, so the nice thing is we're coming with, as a research project, we're coming with our own funding. So this means, of course, also that when we come with our own funding, we're providing a service for free, in a sense, right now. So in that sense, people are much more open if you come with a little bit of funding yourself and coming with ideas. But in general, people want to have the best patient experience. It's not like anyone think it's fun to put small kids in anesthesia. I mean, I've been present in one of those sedation or full anesthesia scans. And, you know, I have to say, I have so much respect for all the clinicians that work with this day to day. It's not fun to see a 2-year-old intubated. It's just not. And they do great work in doing this. And, you know, it's very important that they're attentive at all times, because there are so many things can happen when you sedate a child. So in that sense, they all want to give the good experience to the patients. It's more like they cannot, additional to their clinical work, make changes happen. So if we can provide them with some prototype projects like ours and show, hey, this works, we can help you, then they say, okay, now that you've shown it, now we can make changes in the workflow.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a really important part there, because most people assume that this is something that's nice to have. It would be nice to have an app. It would be nice to have a video. It would be nice to have some blue or pink lights in the MR room, or a mock scanner, or a way to entertain the patient during the scan. That would be nice to have. But I don't think they know the effects it would have, the summary of it in terms of reduction of risk, patient experience improvement, but also not only for the patient, but also for the radiographer, because things goes more smooth. I think they have a very stressful day due to the long queue and waiting list, and they're probably constantly reminded that we need to speed up, we need to speed up, we need to speed up.
And you know, just when we have now had some of those children scans without GA, you know, the radiographers are really also sitting there and are like, yeah, go, come on, you can do it without, you know, it's going to be good. And then they're happy when the scans are good. And so they get of course, really invested in this process as well, just as much as we are.
That's really cool. And I think, like we said, like I mentioned earlier, I think it will mean a lot to them. It's when you're coaching someone through an MR scan and they come out with a big smiling face, you share that experience. It's not just for the patient, it's also for the radiographer as well. If someone of the audience wants to read more about the research you've done and the measures you've done, where can they go?
Yeah, so you just go to Google my name, Melanie Ganz, and you will come to my homepage where we have a whole dedicated page for the Children's Project. You can find a lot of resources there. And then otherwise, always feel free to reach out to me directly. So I'm located at the Neurobiology Research Unit at Rigshospitalet. So you can also find me over nru.dk and just shoot me an email or look at our project on GitHub.
Yeah, and I'll also put the link in the description so that it's easier for people to find as well. I just wanted to thank you not just for the interview, but also for doing the work. It's so fun to see someone who pushed through and is showing results that this is not just a need to have, it's a must have, and it should be the new standard. So we just have to campaign that in the next 10 years, and probably then it will be the new standard, hopefully before. But thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. And definitely, I mean, we also are standing on the shoulders of everyone that has done stuff before, especially in research where they have scanned. So there are kudos to everyone before us that has worked with everything. And yeah, there's a bunch of literature out to dig into. So there's so much to learn from what has been done. So I hope we can just bring it a little bit further and a little bit more into the clinic.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.